Let me say a very big thank you to LBS Alumni for having me here to lead the discussion of this subject, very dear to every Nigerian and every important stakeholder of Nigeria. And that is to look at the Nigerian economy and do a kind of midterm review. Background historical issues, major needs and interpretation, policy headwinds and tailwinds, then the trajectory and implications. Then I conclude with a slide. Now, in terms of background, and this is just to remind ourselves how we got to where we are before we begin to look at the issues. Largely, I used data because one of the things we emphasize now is that if you are going to do any research, it should be evidence-based research. And in fact, as we speak, that is the engagement we'll be having with Central Bank next week, and that is in looking at the Central Bank itself in policy formulation to depend more and more on data, interpret that, and then take a position based on what the data is saying. Now, if we look at the Nigerian economy up until 2014, it was growing very strongly, but the growth was non-inclusive, which means we were growing, but we're not creating jobs. So now, we averaged 6.4% between 2001 and 2014, one of the highest around the world. But then, and that is why I'm situating this in this context, this year is a pre-election year, and there's a whole lot of data I will show you on that. Historically, you see the pattern, and then we can begin to talk about what to expect. Now, being a pre-election year, 2014 brought a dampening in the GDP growth rate at 2.5%, and of course, that led us also into recession, as this chart shows. Now, the 2016 recession only complicated the mystery. I will show you in the next slide how we rate on the mystery index chart. It's very frightening, and I'm not too sure anybody has put this before the government. So now, inflation, of course, got to a peak, January 2017, 18.72, and it has been trending downward since then, coming to 11.23%, which was released only this Monday. As of June, unemployment was 14.4% in the first quarter of 2017, resulting in basic mystery index of 33.12%. But we see the chart now. So in which case, the recession that happened actually cost Nigeria about 1.4% GDP growth rate, which means the GDP growth rate dampened by 1% as a result of the recession. So the average for 2001 to 2017 came to 5.45%. And we can see how the economy went down here below 0.0% growth rate. But now talking about the mystery index, there are actually 4 indices that are used to construct that index. There is inflation rate, unemployment rate, maximum lending rate, and then the GDP growth rate. And the pattern is that you add unemployment rate to inflation rate and also to the maximum lending rate, then subtract the GDP growth rate. So which means the lower it is, which means your economic growth relative to those negatives, that the stronger your economic growth, the lower will be that mystery index. So but this is the pattern for Nigeria for the data available between 2010 and the third quarter of last year. So in which case, data tells us that there is need for urgent intervention in the 4 components of the mystery index. That is unemployment rate, which is very high, and of course inflation rate, yes, trending downward, but the present level of the inflation rate is not strong enough to outweigh the negatives in the other 3 indices. Lending rate, yes, is also still very high up. GDP growth rate is trending up. Now, if you look at 4 indices here, the first is unemployment rate. Now, the black line is the trend line, which shows that it is trending upwards, and it is not about to drop from what this data is saying to us. Now, if you look at the maximum lending rate, also up until May 2018, all of these are official data, not my own estimates. So what we do is take data from either CBN or any of the agencies, then we put it together, interpret, and present back to them. And interestingly, many times, they don't interpret data the way they are supposed to do. So when we interpret, it comes to them as a surprise. Now, if you look at inflation rate, yes, that is where the only good news is for now. And why I say that is this. If you look at this trend line, which of course I have from 1970 till date, even though the I have here takes only December 2003 to June 2018. When you look at the trend line from 1970 till date, it is pointing upwards. But there's an interesting development that happened just this June. That is when the data for June came out this week, Monday. The inflation rate dropped below the trend line for the first time. April 2016. Because that was when it crossed that line and as it went up there. Which means in terms of inflation rate, yes, it's some good news in a way. But when you come here and look at the GDP growth rate, yes, we climbed out of recession, no doubt. But if you look at the growth rate, it has kissed the trend. If nothing urgent is done about GDP growth, we might likely slip below the trend line. And of course, that can also send us in a direction we don't like, which would result in a recession. And if we have another one, that would mean dip. It is more difficult to come out of a double dip than from a single recession. So we are in what I would call a fragile state, so to say. That is what this chart is showing. Yes, it shows that yes, there's good reason to believe that yes, we are doing very well here. But when you look at the trend line between 2013 first quarter and first quarter of 2018, the available data, the trend line shows that GDP is actually trending downwards in spite of this recovery here that we see. So it then also means that an urgent need for action. I've said about this already in terms of right the trend line. Which means the next thing we may expect is for it to drop below the trend line. So now, if we come to external sector, looking at the trends with exports and imports, again limiting ourselves to first quarter 2020 to first quarter 2018. Again, official data from the National Bureau of Statistics. Foreign trade data is strengthening external sector. Exports are expanding rapidly, but there is a caveat there. On the back of what? Oil, basically. So in which case, in terms of oil production, in terms of oil export, and of course, favorable oil price. So that is what exports are growing on the back of. Now, imports trended downwards from June 2017 and then turned upward in January 2018, which means imports have also picked up now. So if imports align with exports, that means an issue of concern to central bank. We dealt with that, I think, a month or so ago, because I was a part of a policy team that looked at that for central bank, looking at our current trade vis-a-vis the exchange value of the naira, and of course talking about stability of that. Then globally, and coming back to Nigeria as to what we should be looking at and doing at this time. Then if you look at oil exports versus non-oil exports, that tells you the story that we are still largely oil dependent because about 76.3% of our exports is oil within that period. So in which case, that portends vulnerability, and that is something we need to also keep in mind. Coming to external reserves, now with a monthly import bill of $2.745 billion during the first quarter of this year, actual figure, current external reserves as at 23rd, that is Monday this week, will interpret into 17.3 months of import bills. That means that is what we can fund with the external reserves. If there is no other encumbrance, and I will show you some encumbrances shortly, okay? Now, it means then that at 17.3 months, we are very comfortable above the minimum threshold recommended by IMF, which is 11. It used to be, but they moved it up to 11 when Nigeria tipped into recession in 2016. We work with that. We seem to be comfortable. But then something happened between January and April this year to Argentina. And that changed the whole perspective to huge external reserves. Because Argentina, as of January 2018, was very, very comfortable in terms of external reserves. But then, in a matter of 2 months, the whole thing melted. And so the interpretation now is that, hey, wait a minute. You may have very bulky external reserves. In the case of Argentina in 2018 first quarter has proven that it is not a basis for you to go to sleep. Because it means there are several other things that can also affect that and cause that money to disappear. In which case, very important to manage investor confidence, whether those investors are local or foreign investors. That's the lesson from Argentina, which, of course, we had actually brought before central bank and also trying to make our government understand. And this is what this guy wrote on Wall Street Journal this year. He said Argentina went from robust to in a matter of months, leaving investors scratching their heads. Among the mysteries, why the country's record hoard of currency reserves, often seen as shield against foreign exchange volatility, did so little to stem the crisis. Now, some 2-3 years ago, what we engaged on in policy shaping was on managing currency crisis. And so what we did there was to look at, I think, some 70-something emerging economies and see the lessons we could draw from them in terms of stabilizing the exchange value of the naira. But from this instance, the lesson seems to be that loads of dollar reserves alone can't make up for weakness in a country's economic underpinnings, which means that is where the real work is, the economic underpinnings, not in the fact that we have a hoard of reserves that we also know came basically from hydrocarbons. So that's why I put it here. What should Nigeria worry about? We should worry about our current account or trade balance, because this year only, yes, it's been positive this year, but up until the end of 2017, we were struggling to hit that balance. But now from January this year till date, it's been positive. And simply because crude oil is favorable, and we've also been having production steady, and equally we have been exporting. The second thing Nigeria should worry about is external borrowing. Yes, if you look back 11 years ago, we were heavily indebted to the foreign lenders. That changed when we did what I call, quote and unquote, a dubious negotiation of reduction of our external liabilities from about $36 billion. We came down to about $5-6 billion, and we said we are done a swap. And in fact, we also achieved debt forgiveness of about $18 billion. Now, when I said dubious, the terminology in economics, which is to represent a situation where if you break the whole thing down, disaggregate, you find that someone just played upon our intelligence. And it's very simple when you play the numbers game. But what I told them then 11 years ago was that Nigeria should not have done that, because no country ever had done that kind of negotiation to pay off your external debt in one first swoop in the dubious claim that they are giving back to you $18 billion. I said, do the arithmetic. They just played on the time value of money. That was what happened. And I said, take the current money market 6% then. If you put 30 billion at a billion that we paid, rather, at 6% compounded, you capitalize earnings, it returned to $30 billion after 30 years. And what we had was a 30-year tenor. Now they now said, look, we can see your hoard of external reserves. And who knows what will happen to it? Let's make this part to you. If you pay 12 out of it, we write off. And I said, they would have collected $1 billion annually in repayment and servicing for 30 years. So it means over 30 years they will get $1 billion. I said, so if I now compute the present value of the million aggregated in time, and I do 6% per annum interest rate, what will I have? I had $12.4 billion. And what they asked us to pay was to pay upfront. What would I pay them? So the government also of the day wanted us to believe that it was really a saving. They now say, okay, annually the federal government budget we put $1 billion in the budget, which of course I criticized because I said, you can't tell me that $1 billion came from savings, because that runs counter to O-level economics. Because O-level economics says, you know what we call the income equation, Y equals C plus S. That means saving comes out of your current income. You can't save out of loan that you don't need to pay, because you've paid it in any case, so it can't be saving. So, but first year, 2007, they put it in the budget. And I asked a question, where is the cash? Nobody answered the question. Then 2008, Yar'Adua was in Sadu. I raised the issue again. So they put it in the budget, interim. When I raised my criticism, Yar'Adua instructed them to take it out of his budget. And that was the last we heard of it, till date. Whereas as of today, we are supposed to be having $1 billion per real club debt saving in our budget. I said that now proved it. But of course, I will leave the other story where I got convinced. But that was when the then finance minister was now contesting for the office of president of the World Bank. I was one of those that made very strong cases for her, looking at the history of Bretton Woods institutions, that she was best positioned to take that presidency of the World Bank. And then what I was reminded of was that debt forgiveness deal. That was a bad deal. I will leave it there. But there were other things I was told that made me keep in promoting our own minister for that office at the time. Then, of course, foreign portfolio investment, we see that shortly. So, capital importation, it will appear to be good news when you look at this chart. These people painted an attractive investment. The most of the investment accounting for 60% of the total for 2017, the whole year, and of course, first quarter of this year accounting for 72.42%. That is portfolio investment. Now, when we go forward and look at exchange rates, the rate remains stable because the CBS capacity remains in the market. That's of course on the back of external reserves that we have. All right. So now some analysts call it defending the naira, but I see it differently. I will say defending the naira. I will see it as necessary stimulus for the economy, and because that is the basic role of any central bank anywhere in the world. I've been involved in central bank policy formulation and advice, at least in Nigeria, in the last 18 years. So, and one has done quite a lot of work across federal reserves, even outside of Nigeria also. So, I can say some things about this, that managing the exchange value of the domestic currency is a fundamental responsibility of the central bank. So, the intervention in that market is not defending the naira. It is simply conducting their fiduciary responsibility. Now, talking about policy headwinds and tailwinds, that's why we go back to some of those things I talked about. There are still some other data that will show that we are not yet doing the right things. And those will point in the direction of how we should interpret these things happening, and then what the government itself should be doing, and even we ourselves, how we should interpret and respond to this. Now, this is a summary of the fiscal direction, expansionary fiscal policy, 9.12 trillion in 2018, and of course, that kicked into operation just June this year. Non-revenue drive, borrowing and capital spending, this has become very worrisome at the rate we are growing it. And of course, on change, social intervention, improve fiscal management, and of course, policy stable, MPR. Of course, only 2 days ago, the MPC finished their meeting and they maintained all rates on the status quo as we are. Stable exchange rate around 305 naira to the dollar, 305.85 actually at the beginning of this week. Regular FX market intervention, treasury bills open to foreign investors, collateral registry, anchor borrower scheme, that's a Greek, and of course, pursuit of financial inclusion. Then trade and commerce, cross-border trade encouragement, export promotion, reduced time for cost of registration and permit, promotion of made in Nigeria, ease of entry and exit, ease of payments, tariff review. Now, the only thing I will comment about here, which I didn't put here in any case, is the issue of the, this common tariff in Africa. Now, I'm one of those that always advise Nigeria against that. for obvious reasons. Because data is there to also prove this. Number one, now this reference to tariff review, I became a part of this process way back in 1987. In fact, about this time, July 1987. Then it was a major World Bank sponsored project, which was a collaboration between our federal government and the World Bank. I was one of the consultants to that. And this happened at the time. The World Bank advised that we should open our borders and then no ban on any items. Let any item come in freely into Nigeria, and then we should allow them to also go out freely. So then they said, if there's any item you want to discourage its importation, you can put a tariff as high as 500%. I then responded to that. I said, listen, I'm in Nigeria, and I know the way a typical Nigerian reasons. Put 500% tariff on an import item, his price will go up, isn't it? They say yes. I said, but the more expensive an item is, the more attractive it is to a Nigerian. And in fact, it will go for it to prove a point that he can afford it, you cannot. I said, so putting it that high won't discourage the consumption. So if you really want to discourage anything that we don't want to come into Nigeria, if it is a ridiculous item, put a ban on it. And I gave them 3 examples. I said walking sticks, safety matches, and I think the third one I gave them was, I gave them 3 items, essentially. And I said, Nigeria has no business importing those items because the technology for them is basic and we should be able to produce it. Yes, toothpicks, that's the third one. So toothpicks, safety matches, walking sticks. But then, the argument currently, because it's a raging controversy, whether Nigeria should sign that common tariff for Africa or not. And I will tell you this story. I sat briefly as a senior economic advisor to the president in 2011, just 3 months. During that period, an issue came to my desk because I was senior special assistant financial sector development. So something came to my desk, and that was relating to how we can revive the automobile market in Nigeria. And so the president said he was interested in that. That was President Jonathan. So we said, okay, let's see how we go about it. So we went around, a few of them that were still in operation. We met with them, asked them why, for example, was Dunlop not in operation? Why was it that Pojo was not in operation? How come Exceeded Battery in Ibadan, then this company in Asaba that was producing silencers and all manner of things for Pojo, this company in Kaduna owned by a friend of mine producing seeds and other things for Pojo. So why did you guys stop producing? And they said the environment was not conducive. Besides, those auto assemblers said the government doesn't patronize us. So now we went to Innosis, and that's the turning point for this issue I'm discussing. Our team went to Nnewi to meet with Innosis. He took them around the factory. And then they now asked him, okay, in what way can government assist you? He said, if he has access to cheap loans. He said, well, we are in the office of the chief economic advisor to the president. We cannot influence lending rate. He said, well, alternatively, if government can patronize me, we said, okay, we have power on that one. So when they brought the case back, they said, when they were about to leave his factory, he stopped them and asked the question. And that is what I think our government today should be told. That story needs to be told to them. That, did you guys come here to Nnewi because we were told I received a Ghanaian government delegation 2 weeks ago? I said, no. They were just doing our own evidence-based research so that we can advise the president appropriately. And they now asked him, okay, what did those Ghanaians say? And that's what is instructive for Nigeria today with respect to this policy. He said they told him, come to Ghana. Come and build a similar factory with here and in Ghana. But we will help you sell your vehicles to Nigeria. True life story, ladies and gentlemen. So, in which case, for them, they recognize that Nigeria is the market. That's where the market is. But the attraction was, we give you an interesting environment to produce. So when they told that story in the office, I said, hey, wait a minute. The Ghanaian government has done the same thing to my own client. And that one is even a more interesting story. Because during this ECOMOG operations. Ghanaian soldiers went for an operation, and they said the rebels, I think it was Sierra Leone then, the rebels somehow overpowered them because they had inferior weapons to what those rebels carried. And they said it was the Nigerian army that came to rescue them. Which case, at that point in time, the Nigerian army had superior weapons to those of the Ghanaian army, as well as the Sierra Leone rebels. So based on that, the Ghanaian government now told United Nations, we won't be a part of peacekeeping operations of UN in Africa unless we have an assurance about the quality of weapons our soldiers will go with. So the UN asked them, okay, how does that concern us? All right, what we want is, we will set up a factory to produce these weapons in Ghana. But let's sign an MOU that we assure us that whatever is produced in that factory for the first 2 years, that UN will buy those products for their peacekeeping operations in Africa. So they signed the MOU. The first 2 years of that factory's output will be bought by United Nations for peacekeeping in Africa. With the MOU, they went to Israel to look for technical partner. When they got to Israel, the Israeli government said, well, anything security matters, whether it is bullion vans, whatever. There's a company in Canada with Israeli interest that sells to Africa. So they left Israel for Canada. When they arrived in Canada and met the people in the company, the chairman of the company and one of the key investors is a Nigerian. And so they took the address, came to this Lagos, went to Surulere, the office of my client, and then they made an offer to me. You come to Ghana, we give you the land, bring your building plan, we build a factory for you. All we want is employ Ghanaians. And that will be 5,000 jobs. Because I did the business plan. It will be 5,000 jobs. So but here is an MOU we have signed. So for the first 2 years, you don't need to market. You have a ready market for anything you produce. So, and of course, they invited the man and myself to Ghana. I couldn't go because I had another engagement. So and I asked him to go. Came back and said they gave him 3 parcels of land to choose from. And even now introduced him to gold trade as a jara. So now, why am I saying this? You see the extent to which a government can go to attract foreign investment, to create jobs, dealing with unemployment, and also position itself strategically within the African market. And so when they told Innocent that, I told my colleagues this story. I said, if we are not careful, the way they lured my own client to Ghana, they will take Innocent from us. But all his vehicles, we are the ones that will buy it. So now, when today people are now saying, oh, Nigeria should also sign that tariff. Almost all the African countries have signed. They will sign because they have nothing to lose. This is where the market is. Immediately you sign it, that means anything produced there. And ladies and gentlemen, Japan and US did this in the early 80s. In 1982, the US put a non-tariff barrier on Japanese automobiles and said not more than 2 million units of Japanese vehicles be allowed to be imported into the US. So the response of Japan was to now go and buy up automobile factories in Europe because that policy referenced manufactured in Japan. So they expanded in Europe and also expanded within US itself. That was the response of the Japanese to the 2 million units limit on Japanese vehicles to be allowed to be imported into the US. So now it is dynamic. Every country looks after its own interest. Even US as the promoter of open borders also at that point in time had to apply that to save its automobile industry. So the argument for me today is that Nigeria should not sign that agreement until we have strengthened our own manufacturing base. And this was what I put before the government when 3 years ago I had the privilege of being the chairman of the organizing committee of the Nigeria Economic Summit. And we adopted the theme Made in Nigeria. And I explained it to them that Made in Nigeria is 2 planks. Made in Nigeria for production. We follow what India is promoting. Because India calls it Make in India. That means we make India conducive for you to produce. Not only for India, but for the rest of the world. So for their own government, they promote make in India. I said, so we take that template for the production leg of made in Nigeria. Then the consumption leg of made in Nigeria will be for us to consume what is made in Nigeria. Of course, I made recommendations on that. That is for 10 years to start with, running from 2016. Of course, the government adopted that because when the Vice VP was acting as president, he signed an executive order relating to that and adopted the percentage that recommended, which was 10%. But I said we should increase it gradually up until 2026. So, but all they did was sign that once and for all and left it there. It's supposed to be reviewed for effectiveness, and then you take it up. And I gave them a reference. If you want to borrow money for any project today from the U.S. Exim Bank, and I've encountered this a couple of times, they will tell you that any money we give to you, 80% of it must be used to procure either the materials or even services from the U.S. And they wanted it to me in respect of a project, which is, an inland container depot, that we needed rich stackers. Those equipment that grab containers on the head and now stacks. It's called rich stacker. And I said, I prefer the Karma brand, which is made in Europe. You know what your Exim Bank told me? They said, well, no problem. If that's what you insist on having. I said, I don't want the American brand, which is Taylor, because it is not as flexible as Karma. Karma can use the parts of Taylor and Volvo. But if you buy Taylor, the American made, you cannot use the components of Karma or Volvo to replace any part in it. So I said, for that reason, and of course, my client has been using this equipment for over 30 years. So he's very familiar with it. So that's what we want. The next thing they told me is, okay, no problem. Since you insist, that's what you want. We still give you the money. But you go and engage an American entity to procure it for you. So I will now give the contract to an American company to go buy Karma for me from Europe and come to deliver in Nigeria. The whole idea simply is that something must be retained within our economy. That's the whole idea about consumption. Now, if we come here, we see some planks of the ERGP, okay? But I can tell you here, the ones I highlighted are the ones enable private sector financing of infrastructure. Yeah, they thought about PPP. That's here. Question is, how many of such PPP have actually seen the light of the day so far, as far as infrastructure? And we know, at least using data, that Nigeria is one of the few countries with the highest project cost per unit of any project whatsoever. If it's a road per kilometer, Nigeria is one of the countries with the highest cost per kilometer of road delivered. So that means if it was done by the private sector in a PPP arrangement, the cost will shrink and the quality will likely also improve. Because depending on the grade of the road, there's a minimum base to have in terms of concrete base before you put the asphalt on it. But I'm not too sure we keep that in Nigeria because our roads could last not long after we construct them. Then of course, the reason I also put this here is because if you look at ERGP itself, it talks about how much it will cost, over $200 billion. And about close to 80% of that is supposed to come from the private sector. That is why this conversation is coming to this. That if truly they want that, then the environment should be made more conducive by the day for the private sector. So then, of course, we thought about expanding the power sector infrastructure. Again, that's a space we have not gotten right yet. There was something I put in where this government, when they were coming in 2015, one of their chieftains, he called himself a chieftain of the party, called me and said, can you give us some things we'd like to see in the president's inauguration address? Bless you. And I said, no problem. He said, well, maximum 3 pages. I said, okay. So I sent him a 1.5 page document, bullet points. And I told them precisely what the government should focus on, which if they did, they wouldn't have to struggle about turning around the economy. We were not even looking at recession at that time. But essentially, it was the key areas. One of the key things I mentioned on power is this. You've done some privatization of some parts of it. if you want performance there, the way to do it is to structure it in a manner that will motivate the private investor. I said, if every power consumer in Nigeria is metered, that means no estimate billing. It means the distribution companies and all those that share in the money. Because if you look at the way the money is handled, whatever they earn is shared by everyone in the value chain. I said, that will bring more money to them if you're able to generate and distribute and deliver more power. So if billing ties with power consumed, it means what you collect now will drop at first to match what you deliver. But because these are private investors, they will begin to think about what they can do to rack up the generation and then distribution so that they can generate also more revenue. I said, until you do that, you are unlikely to get any significant improvement in power. And that's what we are still struggling with today. Yes, they told us that now we're generating capacity, 7,000 megawatts. All right? And this is 2018, ladies and gentlemen. When we started with Vision 2020, what we envisioned was by year 2020, we should be generating 40,000 megawatts. And I laid it before the government of the day. And I said, let government from 2008, and Yar'Adua actually adopted it, government adopted it. I said, give every minister targets. I gave a similar template to this government, but they haven't implemented it. I said, give them targets. For the Prime Minister, give him a target that we must expand our generation capacity by 3,000 megawatts annually. And I said, the basis is this. We're then doing about 3,200, all right? So if we are going to 40,000 by 2020, we had a space of 13 years. So if we are able to do 3,000 annually as addition, that would be within the 13-year period, 39,000 addition. If you take that in addition to 3,200, that will take us comfortably above 40,000 target for year 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, Yar'Adua adopted it. So in 2008, he gave the Prime Minister target of 6,000. That was where it came from. Because many heard it that the government announced target for the Prime Minister then, but they didn't know the story behind it. That's the story I just told you. And the thing came from me. So what I said is, give also the Works Minister target that will be based on how many kilometers of roads and bridges are delivered annually. Not how much money he or she was given and whether the money was fully exhausted. Let's talk about deliverables. And I gave the same template on performance management to the current government. But I don't know what they have done with it. Because what I said in that template is that every minister with targets relating to his or her, and I use water and housing to demonstrate that. Everything under works, power, and housing are listed out and developed targets. And now said, on a quarterly basis, you will check the performance in each of these areas. So, and then of course, the performance will be rated as using the traffic light concept. If you met the target, it will be a green in front of that. If you met it partially, but above 60%, you get a yellow. Maybe it is below 60, that's a red. If I said, if a minister then gets 3 consecutive reds, that means 3 consecutive quarters, he or she has no business remaining in that cabinet. That was what I put in the template for them. But of course, you know politicians now. Yeah, they collected it. Only God knows what they are doing with it. A lot of noise about local refining for self-sufficiency. Initially, we said 2019. Yesterday in the papers, we saw a report on an interview granted by Lico talking about 2020. But I've also come across somewhere where they said it will be ready in 2023. So nobody really knows when that refinery will be ready. Because I saw something on Reuters about 2 weeks ago where, you know, they quoted and Lico mentioning in the conversation that will be 2021. But this week we are in. I read in the papers again another interview where I said it will be 2021. But of course, we know it's looking for $4.5 billion US dollars loan to finance that, you know, presently. So in which case, hinging our plan on the execution of that refinery, I don't think is the direction the government should go. So look at some other things there. So I'm almost at the end of my presentation. All of these are just Where this again, like I told them, I don't have any problem with assumptions for the budget of this year. What is more important is execution. Because assumptions you can argue left and right and go in any direction. Is as you are convinced and persuaded based on whatever data you are also looking at. It's just like when two of us stand and someone writes on the ground the figure 6. If I'm standing here and the base is towards me, I will call it 6. You standing there looking at the same figure, you will call it 9. So it depends on the angle from which you are looking at it. So this is the final part. As noted earlier, growth tanked in the first quarter of this year. That means the growth of GDP now came to the trend line, which means if we are not careful, the trajectory is that we go down. So and that also means that the economy, as it were, is still fragile. This is in spite of several intervention schemes across several sectors, and of course, this of pragmatism and creativity. Now, in January, when our firm in collaboration with CIBN did the economic outlook, I said if the government did not address the problem of the clash of farmers and herdsmen, that we'll likely see the prices of foodstuffs go up again, and we find ourselves even get to a point where what we now produce locally is not enough to take care of our needs, and we go back again to food importation. That was in January this year. Now, the MPC meeting of this week, this now came out officially in the central bank communique of that meeting, that the clash has started affecting food prices. So, and for me, I said, look, all these things, they are not rocket science. It's just simple common sense. If we've been touting the middle belt over decades as the food basket of Nigeria, and suddenly running away from the farms, they are not going back, they are not losses in each harvest period you get into, we come to impact those who consume it. And then when I come to Lagos, it becomes frightening. Because how many of us in Lagos farm? What we eat, where do we get it from? To the market. It's from the hinterland. So in which case, where you have the largest percentage of your population, over 20%, by the way. Well, just about over 10%, sorry. Over 10% in Lagos. So, and Lagos is still receiving more and more on a daily basis per 30 minutes when we check the data. But the number of people that enter Lagos without a plan to go back to where they came from. So, what the situation is. But now it's officially proven. That's why I put this here. Now it is proven. Now this week. That is evening of Tuesday officially from Central Bank. Then infrastructure. There are misplaced priorities, and of course, cost of project execution remains worrisome. These two. There's gradual. The most state and local government roads are in bad shape. And I'm sure, especially those of us in Lagos, we attest to that. Most of the inner roads, safe everywhere. In fact, I can say this here. This Monday, I told them in the church where I worship, I said, look, let's create a works committee so that we can repair government roads close by to us and do that as the church's CSR. I just discovered that on Monday. Then on Tuesday, the committee was constituted. They went to do evaluation of some stretch of the road, brought the report back. Then yesterday afternoon, somebody called me from the church, excited. They said, that I want to repair. I would have gone there this Saturday. That the state government has come to repair. I said, that's good. Only yesterday. So, but of course, I mean, the real issue is commuting time has become a major driver. The impact economically. So, and of course, well-being of citizens, mostly urban dwellers. There's also considerable leakage still in the execution of projects for chronic capitalism, which is getting further entrenched. Of course, coming to the environment, the typical discourse about policy sustenance and continuity in the pre-election year, for now, answers to low risk. And my reason is simply this: there is no formidable candidate yet to emerge to effectively challenge the incumbent president. So until you see that, the way we see the political environment is low as far as policy is concerned. Because if the same man remains in the office, then the likelihood is that the policy cocktail will formidable challenger emerges. This change. That's why I put it in bold and red. Then, of course, if you look here, this possible why foreign investors are still showing great interest in positioning for a post-2019 election Nigerian business space. And of course, we've been through this in the past. And I can roll that way back to even the time of banking consolidation. I remember then Citibank, their head office is just down the road here. They came to ask me, this 25 billion naira capital, should we bring it or leave Nigeria? And I told Citibank, it was for free. They didn't pay me for the consulting. I mean, consultants. I said, look, after consolidation, this economy will still continue to grow. And in any case, if you put in that 25 billion, I assure you in a few years you will get it back. I then reminded them about their own history. How in a particular way, the dividends that Citibank paid for just 1 year was exactly equal to the entire share capital. They are paid off share capital. I said, so this environment will still give you that opportunity. Of course, it was after then they constructed this building here, the head office. It didn't exist before then. Same thing, we even see many international consultancies, of course, much bigger than what we can do here, that come to us to ask such questions, especially pre-election year. I won't mention the names. But the point is, everyone gets worried when it gets to pre-election year. What will likely happen? I will show you a few data to illustrate that. Now, I talked about portfolio investors earlier on. They also dominate our stock market. That's the stock market data that you see here. Now, when you talk about foreign portfolio investors, 43.44% of the market between January and March this year, but for the first half year, 50% of the market is the hand of foreign investors. Now, that might not sound any alarm bell until you compare that with our external reserves. Now, if you take market capitalization, equities only, 24th of July, that was this week, Tuesday, it was 13.2 trillion. Now, if we go by the share of foreign investors at 54.54 at the end of June this year, that would translate to 7.2 trillion naira or $20.01 billion. Now, this $20.01 billion was the equivalent of 42.94% of the liquid portion of our external reserves. Which means, if for any reason we don't handle this politics we are playing, and those foreign investors choose to exit, the same phenomenon that happened between April and November 2008, 10 years ago, will happen here. And of course, if you look at the history of financial crisis, about 800 years of studying financial crisis, there's a typical cycle to it. Every 10 years, financial crisis happens globally. Although it might not be global in nature as the GFC of 2008 to 2010, but there will always be a jurisdiction where it will happen. So, and there is a discussion now going on globally that we may likely see another crisis this year, being the 10th anniversary of the GFC of 2008. So, and that means also countries like Nigeria should be wary about the way we manage our economy and in particular the financial system. Now, if you look at this, this shows also a trajectory that we should worry about. Now, this is the interplay between foreign inflow and outflow. Now, if you look at the data for the entire year 2016, inflows was 256 and outflow 261. All these are in $1 billion. Okay? I mean, sorry. They are $1 million. Sorry, million. Then 2017, 772 total. Inflow. Outflow was 435. That was good news, isn't it? Right. Now, as at March this year, for the month, 69.7 inflow, 62.5 outflow. That was positive inflow, a net inflow. April this year, also positive inflow, that's net inflow. May this year, these are all official data, not my own, as I said earlier. So the outflow in May this year was almost, in fact, more than double the inflow in May. Then in June, inflow dropped to 47. Outflow also dropped to 54 because a lot of them, those who were more concerned, had taken out their money. So even at that, there was still a negative net inflow. In fact, we put it as a net outflow. So in which case, we should worry about that. The first half year, January to June this year, inflows total 380 against outflows of 419.06. So then, pre-election year blues, stock market. What's the pattern? May 9. Capitalization. Index dampened. Between December 2002 and May 2003, another year of election, before and then. So before 0.75, May 0.88. Of course, the index, it picked up. Why? Because the incumbent president won the election. So, and remained in office. Then, of course, 2006, 2007, there was transition. If I remember at the time when we had the summit, our presentation to President Obasanjo, you know, now, all this talk about third-term agenda and all those, of course, nobody will come out and say this is the evidence, okay? And we talk about evidence-based research. But we gave him then a presentation at the Economic Summit, which we titled, Don't Drop the Baton. So, and the idea was that if you are going to leave office, don't do it the way Babangida left. Let's do a proper handing over to someone that won an election. So, and that, of course, played out here. Because election held, he handed over to Yar'Adua, no doubt, and we can see it in the data here. So the market was strong again. But if you look at 2010, December, vis-a-vis May 2011, there was a slight gain, all right, because that was when Jonathan won the election. Of course, he won the election on the back of inheriting the leftover portion of Yar'Adua's tenure. Then look at the December 2014 and May 2015. There was also a slight gain. That was the period where transition from one political party to another also succeeded, which of course was contrary to the expectation. Because many people thought there would be chaos in Nigeria. In fact, the prediction by the US dating back several years was that by 2015, Nigeria was likely to break up. That was the CIA projection. You know, CIA also makes forecasts on every nation. They track our economic data. That's what they call the intelligence report. And get that on the internet anyway. So then looking at where we are now, December last year, and then July this year, we haven't even gotten to 2019 yet. If you look at it, there's a slight dampening in the stock market. When you look at external reserves and crude oil price, again a similar pattern. What it was pre-election year and what it was at the handing over. Again, data from 1998 that I have here. December 98, May 99, 2002 December, May 2003, up until again December last year and this July. And we can see what happened there. Drop in external reserves, transition, again here, increase, then here a drop, this one a big drop, the highest drop. Okay, here in terms of this one, absolute highest drop during transition. And then here, highest relative drop. And of course, there are stories behind those numbers, which I won't tell here. Okay. So then, of course, you look at the price of crude oil in the national oil market. So again, you see differences. So, and of course, my verdict is there. So let's conclude. Now, the fate of the Nigerian economy still hangs on hydrocarbons. The volume produced and exported vis-a-vis the international market price. All of that is still positive. But if any of those, say, has a problem, then we see that truly where we are today is a mirage. It's really a mirage. And Argentina proved that this year in terms of results and, of course, in terms of confidence of external investors. This vulnerability may only be mitigated by pursuit of business unusual, which is what I call strengthened non-health sector to truly diversify foreign earnings and then reduce reliance on impulse consumption. And the government must be the leader in that. Then by shrinking the space for the private sector with seeming policy contradictions in dependence on private funding of ERGP and strangulating revenue drive, unorthodox methods, levels, we shouldn't expect a significant change in the light of that. Sounded this as a warning some 4 or 5 years ago. Unfortunately, it's even getting worse today. That once government becomes fixated on non-revenue domestically and the focus is on tax, I'm not in any way supporting tax evasion. But the point is, if a tax auditor comes to me, and this is my personal experience anyway, and he brings a bill without conducting an audit and says, I owe tax of 12 million. I say, what do you mean? From what? In this recessed economy, where income dropped, where we reduce staff salary. If I put it before my staff then, should we sack or reduce pay? They said we should reduce pay so that we can remain together as a team. I say, okay, fine. Now, look at the numbers and advise me. What percentage reduction? Our own staff in our firm on their own said we should cut pay by 40%. So we drop from 100 to 60% of our normal pay during that recession period. That was when the taxman brought a higher tax bill. And then on top of it, said we didn't pay withholding tax. I said withholding tax. Are we the ones to pay it? It's the client with service that we withhold it and pay to you. And of course, there was even nothing for directors, talk less of you pay directors fees, so therefore withholding tax. So we have the basis for that. Then the next thing is, okay, what will you do about it? I said, do about what? There was a particular tax I paid. They came back and said I didn't pay it. I then brought out evidence. They said, oh, okay, it's because we changed your tax number. I said, okay, if you change my tax number and I'm not aware, shouldn't you reconcile the old tax number with the new one? And then see clearly that I paid the tax? And they said, the record doesn't show that you paid. I said, okay, if that is the argument, then let's take it forward. The next thing they will harass you, I said, hey, we come to seal up your office. I seal it up. My office is my laptop. You can't see my laptop. On a mobile office, I can work from anywhere. But of course, you have people that you also employ. So if it is for their own sake, then you want to do everything possible at your own inconvenience. But for a government that is fixated on raising revenue, even when it is ungodly, let me put it that way. The policy has been carrying some of the burden that well-structured fiscal and commercial policies should have delivered. And we saw that this week in the MPC communique, where Central Bank is now trying to create incentives for banks to lend at single digit. I said, okay, we create that incentive around CRR, that if you lend single digit, then we'll probably give you a lower CRR. They are still working on that, okay? And of course, on that, we have some corrections. So I usually don't comment on CBN any longer in the public. What they said is, look, since we do a lot of correction with you, and bring it to us. But if we speak in the public, defend us. That was the way they put it. Defend what we are doing if we need it. But please, any idea you have, because we know you do your research based on evidence. So always bring it to us, because we want to hear from people like you. So ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for listening to me.
Lagos Business School, Pan Atlantic University.